Good morning and welcome to Atheist Talk on KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Good morning to all of you joining us locally by radio and streaming online. We appreciate you tuning in. Today is Sunday, December 30th, 2018, and I'm your host, Hertzy Hertz. I'm here in studio, and on Skype we have Tucker Drake from the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. This is an open community conversation, and we welcome and encourage listener interaction with your phone calls to 952-946-6205, your emails to radio@mnatheist.org, tweet us at @atheisttalk, or use the hashtag that I'll provide in a minute, or you can check out our Facebook page, Atheist Talk. The phone number is only available when we are live, but you can always email, tweet, or comment, whether you're listening live or listening to the podcast later. Well, there's always been bits of random information floating around, things you hear from a friend of a friend, things that we take, almost for granted. Today, we're going to actually be looking at that with Tucker. We're going to be talking about the fictions we hold on to. Things like a bull in a china shop, the 5-second rule, and all that fun stuff. Tucker, how you doing?
All right. How are you?
Good. Well, before we start talking about these interesting fictions, why don't you talk about your podcast?
Well, it's what I do on the podcast is one episode will be covering news stories, and the other episode, I do one a week, will be me and another guy reading from forgotten bits of religious literature. Like, we just started reading, it's called Pistis Sophia, which is the first Gnostic text that was ever discovered. And it was discovered.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it was discovered in the late 18th century.
Okay, and a Gnostic text, for those of us who may not know about that.
Okay. Well, the Gnostics were an offshoot of Christianity who had rather different views of Christianity than the Catholic Church and modern Christians do. Their belief was that the way you got to know God was by knowing yourself. They were not really big on a church hierarchical structure or anything like that. Influences on them were the Qumran sect, who left the books that were found at Nag Hammadi and the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's also some speculation that they may have been influenced by Buddhist missionaries who were in that part of the world at the time.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that actually sounds really interesting. Well, here on Atheist Talk, we just talk. All right. So you're actually the one who brought up this idea for a topic, and then I was actually with my family because my one of my siblings was in town, and so I asked them for some, and they came up with like an entire list. Do you still have the link to the Google Doc?
Well, I no. I'll just say that.
That's fine. I can get this to you really quick. Live radio, everybody. We're so professional. Please note, I am not a professional. There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so the first one is one that actually my mom brought up, which is the ham story. And then I remember you asking me about that one. So the ham story is about a family who, and of course, the whole story may be made up. I mean, in all honesty, I haven't fact-checked it. But it's about this family who, they kept shaving off a piece of like a little bit of the side of the ham whenever they baked it. And when asked, nobody could figure out why. Finally, they get the person who was trying to figure this out asked older and older generations, and finally found one where it was like, why is this a thing? Well, it turns out there was one year where the ham didn't fit in either the roaster or the oven, and they had to shave a little bit off, and they just kept doing it without asking questions. Which, I mean, is kind of the basis for this whole thing, is all these things that have all this supposed stuff behind it, and then we disprove it, and then we're still like, well,
Right. Got me thinking about this was I went over the holidays with my family to Amish country because, it's old world, craftsmanship. It's all hand done, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, isn't there supposed to be like a thing where they're not supposed to use tools?
Right. Modern technology is supposedly verboten. But, the first thing you notice when you're driving into the area, because there's in the part of Ohio that we were in, there's a whole cluster of towns that have large Amish population. You'll notice that there's these houses. They don't have power lines running to them, but they all have solar panels on the roof or big solar arrays in the yard. And then, we went into cheese shops. That was really the only places we stopped. And you go into the cheese shops and they all have like this glass wall where you can see how everything's made. And there's not, a whole bunch of Amish women churning butter or anything like that. It's all modern stainless steel equipment, and it's all electrically powered and everything else. And it's so, you objectively sit there and look at that and you think, well, this really isn't any different than the stuff you would buy at the grocery store made by the large commercial dairies.
No. Well, and it's... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, but everybody seems to think it's special because the Amish did it.
Yeah, it reminds me of an article I read actually when I was younger, and it was about a young Amish girl, and now granted this was like 20 years ago, maybe longer, but they were talking about how, they don't use tools and stuff, but this particular family did have a windmill that provided plumbing, or they had some thing they had jerry-rigged to provide plumbing, and I'm like, it's like with your story, it's like, well then how is that different than some of the other technology we use? I mean... You got plumbing. Isn't plumbing too forward?
Yeah, there's a documentary on the Amish. It was done in the early 2000s called The Devil's Playground. And they follow a couple of kids around during Rumspringa, which is where the kids drop out of school and they live life with, normal people before deciding whether or not they want to join the church. And one of the kids they followed worked in his dad's wood shop, and he'd get in there and he flipped on all the electric lights. There was nothing but power tools. There was you didn't see any old hand planers or anything like that. It was all modern equipment, and it's like how is this different? And their logic or rationale behind all of it is that because it's not in the house, it's okay.
So they basically just find ways around all of the stuff like most religious that we've seen.
Right.
Interesting.
It reminds you very much, if you've seen the Bill Maher documentary Religulous, where he's in Israel and they're showing all the stuff that they do to get around the restrictions on the Sabbath.
Oh, yeah, because isn't it one of them, like, you can't press a button so nobody takes the elevator, and then somebody, like, makes a machine that will press the button for you, and it's like, this is a lot of work to not press a button.
Right. Yeah. And they have a special wheelchair that runs on compressed air. That way you're not using electricity, which they consider to be fire.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh. So out of the list, which one of those do you find the funniest? We'll start there.
Probably the pee is sterile one, because I actually had an anthropology teacher tell me that.
Yeah, I remember hearing that as a kid and such, and now it's like, oh man, that's... Because I know, like, in an emergency, you're supposed to be able to drink it 3 times, and I'm like, okay, so wait, does that mean you can't? Because that's going to get awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and she brought it up because she was talking about, doing field studies. And she was telling people, if you're going to have a career, you need to, you need to understand yourself so you don't pick the wrong group to go study. And there was some tribe in Africa that they worship cattle, and before every meal they wash their hands in cattle urine. And she said, fresh urine is sterile, so you don't have to worry about getting sick. And I'm just like, I don't care.
That's still. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, there's that whole health movement now of people drinking urine because it's supposedly good for you and you'll live forever or whatever else.
Which also doesn't make any sense because it's like whether or not urine has bacteria, urine is also all of the liquid stuff your body's just like, it's a way for it to flush things out, like hormones, sometimes medicine stuff, which I know people also freak out because they're like, all of this stuff is affecting our waters. I'm like, I really don't think that the small trace amounts of like whatever I'm taking is changing everybody's brain chemistry. Yeah. Yeah. It's disturbing. I mean, yeah, it's like there's still stuff there. My favorite actually is the double dipping. Nope, but we are actually going to have to get back to that after the break. Please stay with us through the break, and we'll return to Atheist Talk with Tucker Drake, talking about the fictions we hold on to. I'm Hertzie Hertz. You're listening to AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Welcome back to AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. You tuned into Atheist Talk, and I'm your host, Hertzie Hertz, and I'm talking via Skype to Tucker Drake of the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. Atheist Talk is produced with the funding from Minnesota Atheists and Cucumbers Restaurant in Edina, Minnesota. Please consider visiting our sponsors, and if you do, let them know that you appreciate their support of Atheist Talk. If you'd like to advertise on the program and help keep us on the air, please contact us at radio@mnatheist.org. As for the here and now, if you'd like to get involved in the conversation with Tucker and I this morning, you can call us at 952-946-6205, email us at radio@mnatheist.org, or tweet us at @atheisttalk, using our Facebook page, Atheist Talk. Tucker, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, excuse me, when we left, we were talking about the dreaded double dipping. Which has gone on for so long. And then one of the things that makes me laugh is when Mythbusters decided to do it, they crack open a couple of jars of, just random off-the-shelf salsa and like some other kind of dip. And they double dip. And even their stale ones, they're like, where they hadn't done any dipping, it was like this array of bacteria and stuff. And it was like, oh, so there's stuff in here even before we do this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not a big fan of double dipping when I'm eating with someone, even if it is relatively harmless. It's just one of those things that strikes me as a bit squicky.
For me, if it's somebody I don't know, I generally won't because, I don't know them. They might have their own stuffs and things. But if it's like my family or like friends I'm very close to, admittedly, there's not a lot of. It's like we're close enough. We're sharing most of the germs, anyways.
Yeah.
Oh, what's another good one? Oh, have you heard of the shaving thickens hair?
Oh, yeah. That's really popular among adolescent boys because, the big thing for us is to be able to grow facial hair. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you get the first little bit of facial hair, you start shaving it because it thickens it and it means you'll get more hair. And like there was a guy I went to school with who, supposedly he screwed up and was shaved too much of his face, and now he had to shave all the way up to his eyeballs because, his facial hair had been thickened, et cetera, by shaving over the years.
I know one that I heard was it wasn't as much the shaving itself, but the direction you shaved. Because if you shave with the grain, supposedly it will thicken less than if you shave against the grain.
But if you shave against the grain, you have a smoother face, which is generally preferred.
And sometimes, because we'll get to the drinking 8 glasses of water a day at some point, because I'm a big fan of that one, as far as it being debunked. But there's a lot of these that sometimes you have to wonder how much there's a little bit of corporateness in there, because and I'm trying not to be a conspiracy theorist, but with companies, it's so much easier than the government, at least for me. It's like, all they have to do is just be like, oh yeah, totally. That's how it goes, and people will believe it.
Well, yeah, and there's certainly a big incentive for companies to do things like that because it gets more people using their product. And I mean, we do have recordings of drug representatives, bragging about how they conned some doctor into giving a patient medication which the rep knew wouldn't help the patient, but would help the company's bottom line.
Stuff like that, just because I mean, that's just slight tangent of that's just something that drives me nuts. Is when people are like, "Oh, I trust the corporations more than the government." I'm like, the government can't keep it secret for the life of it. It really can't. Or at least not well.
Every time I see a corporation backing something strange, or even not something strange, just almost anything, my first question is, I wonder how they're making money off of this. Because they are somehow.
Oh, yeah. And for those of you just tuning in, that is Sam, our awesome producer. And Sam, if you just want to come in on this, go for it.
I have a lot of thoughts about corporations.
Oh, our Patreon-only content might get interesting. And if you'd like to become a patron... no, because actually, this goes straight into that drinking 8 glasses of water a day. Because have you seen the Tucker Ruins Everything about that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, or not Tucker. Adam Ruins Everything. Wow. I need more coffee. Sorry, Tucker.
All right.
No, it's Adam Ruins Everything, which is a great, great show, and people should watch it. No, we are not paid by them, but I would take their money. But he did an entire thing about the whole idea of drinking 8 glasses of water a day. And where did the study for that come from? The company that provides water, like not tap water, just bottled water.
Yeah. And that actually ties into one of the other things on the list of, the 5-second rule.
Yes.
Because there was a study produced that said, oh, yeah, 5 seconds is fine. And then it turned out that the study was funded by, I think, a cleaning products company or something. It was some corporation. And, as soon as people started investigating the study and the researcher, everything fell apart. There was no data. There was no control, no anything to verify it. It was just something they had spun, at the behest of the company.
Yeah. And wasn't there a study done where they left it for like 10 seconds or they left it for like varying amount of times and the amount of bacteria found was pretty negligible?
Probably.
I feel, please fact check us on this. We are not experts. If Maddie were here, she'd probably have some great stuff for that. But she's at work.
I work for a company that preps food for restaurants. And if we just prep the meat, we don't prep like the whole meals or anything like that, but we prep the meat. And anything that hits the floor before it's been cooked, we wash off and go ahead and use it. And that's with USDA inspectors right there.
Well, I mean, like, if you think about it, though, I mean, typically you're cooking the meat to a specific temperature and things like that.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not like at a certain point, I'm like, well, if you cook it to the degrees that it says, you're killing off the bacteria anyway, so...
Yeah, and the place I work at, we're continually cleaning everything. The floors are continually hosed down. They are, a couple of times a day. They're washed with chemicals and sterilized, so it's probably cleaner than your typical household floor.
Well, it's definitely cleaner than my floor. But we do have another quick break. Please stay with us, and we'll return to Atheist Talk with Tucker Drake, talking about our fictions that we hold on to. I'm Hertzie Hertz. You're listening to AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Thank you for tuning in to Atheist Talk on AM 950 KTNF. I'm your host, Hertzie Hertz, and we're having what I would classify as an awesome conversation with Tucker Drake of the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. If you'd like to get involved in the conversation with Tucker and I this morning, you can call us at 952-946-6205, email us at radio@mnatheist.org, or tweet us at @atheisttalk, or check out our Facebook page. Before we continue this conversation, there's a bit of housekeeping I need to attend to. I want to note our group of dedicated volunteers and the generous donations of you, our listeners. You help keep Atheist Talk on the air and in podcast form. And I want to note our donors of the week, which is Cynthia. Thank you, Cynthia. If you're able to help with a donation, please consider doing so by going to our Radio Fund page or our Patreon, where you can get extended interviews at www.patreon.com/atheisttalk. Minnesota Atheist is a 501c3 tax-deductible organization. We couldn't do the show without you, and we deeply appreciate your support. Music for from Atheist Talk is by composer and member Brent Michael Davis and is used with permission. Please note, all opinions are of the guest and host only and do not necessarily reflect Minnesota Atheists as an organization. And now let's get back to our conversation with Tucker. Tucker, how are you doing?
All right. I got a cat in my arms.
Oh, is it a fluffy kitty?
He's a short hair.
Oh, they're so cute. I love all cats. One day I will get a Norwegian forest cat. That's kind of one of my dream cats.
Oh, yeah, those are gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. When I was a kid and I was interested in Norse mythology and I heard that Freya's chariot was pulled by cats, I was like, I don't get it. I mean, I was looking at the cat in the house and I was like, this cat can't pull anything. And then I saw Norwegian forest cat and I'm like, oh, that. Okay, yeah, you get about 6 of those, you can probably pull a human. All right, but so we're talking about fictions that we hold on to. My sister actually had one that I thought was absolutely hilarious. And this is because I am 5'7". My father is about 6 feet tall. My brother's also about 5'7", and she is 5'1". Now, to make things fair, my mother's also about 5 feet, so there are genetics involved. But hers is that coffee stunts your growth. And admittedly, out of the 3 of us, she is the one who drank coffee the earliest and the most.
It's been a long time since I heard that.
I know. Some of them, I mean, but I can't think of any reason why caffeine would do, because I mean, that's really all that's in there that people talk about is caffeine. What else in coffee would stunt your growth?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you've read any of the early history of the European explorations of America, there were all these different tales about, what things would do to you. Of course, this was all before, there was anything that could realistically be called medical science. And, they had all these crazy tales about what tobacco would do to you. And then, centuries later, we find out that actually there is some truth to what they were saying, but the way they originally said it was presented in such a manner that it seemed outlandish and crazy. And it was filled with stuff that we know clearly tobacco doesn't do, it would turn you into a wild, hairy person or things like that. But, as far as the health effects, they got a lot of them right, but that was probably just pure random chance.
Go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, at that period of time, they were probably anything that was weird and different was feared. Because it took until the 19th century before Europeans realized, hey, you can actually eat tomatoes.
Oh my God. There are days though, because I'm not the biggest tomato fan, where they could have gone a little longer. That is true. I mean, that's true. I mean, the idea of something new, and it was like, well, what is this? Well, you try it. I don't want to try it. You try it. Here, we'll get Bob to try it. Sam, do you want to try it? I'm going to take your silence as a no. But speaking of that, one of the things that we have on here that also makes me, well, I fully admit twitch, is the I don't eat chemicals.
Oh. Yeah.
Paired with the I only eat natural food.
There was some podcast, and I don't remember which one it was, but it was like one of the big ones from like the BBC or NPR, where they interviewed a paleoanthropologist, right? This is a guy who, he studies the remains of ancient societies as well as modern primitive societies, or less technologically developed societies, I guess you should say. And they asked him about, the whole paleo diet movement, and his teardown of the paleo diet movement was just epic, because he points out all the plants you're eating today have no resemblance to anything our ancestors would have eaten, regardless of whether or not they have been, modified through things like CRISPR or just selective breeding. And we don't eat the kinds of things that they ate because, sure, we'll eat beef, pork, chicken, things like that. But, they'd happily chow down on a lizard if they found one, because that was food.
I've actually seen two things that at least I am in full support of. One which is the idea of using iguana instead of chicken, because iguanas actually need less space. They taste like chicken, so it's like the carbon footprint could be reduced. And the other one is eating bugs, which I have done.
Well, I don't think I could eat the bugs.
You would, you'd be surprised, because there's I think it's grasshopper flour. So it's but think about it. It's mostly protein. So you take the flour, you make it into like a cake, and your cake is already technically healthier than a normal cake.
Yeah. Well, I know in places like Thailand, they eat buttered crickets like we would eat buttered popcorn.
I was going to say that actually sounds pretty good. But then I was so crazy enough to try bugs, so...
Yeah.
If you just dry roast them and you don't put anything on them, they don't really taste like much. But if you put some flavor, I mean, it tastes like that flavor, kind of like popcorn.
Yeah. Well, and I'll happily eat lobster and shrimp, and those are just aquatic insects, basically.
Yep. Oh, lobster and shrimp, noms. So, are you anywhere near like an ocean at all?
I am nowhere near an ocean. I am in Tennessee, so.
Oh, that's right. Okay, so at least we can have that in common, because Minnesota is technically as landlocked as you can get. So getting fresh seafood is like almost impossible.
Yeah.
Well, unless you like walleye. Like we have walleye, we have Rockies, we have that kind of stuff that you can go fishing for. We do only have 10,000 lakes. Actually,
I think that's a myth also.
That is. I was going to say that, because that's actually a myth. We do not have 10,000 lakes.
You have more or less? We
have a lot more. We have like another 5K at least.
Those glaciers don't mess around.
No. Actually, when I was a kid and I was reading a Paul Bunyan story, because, Paul Bunyan was, one of the things that we talk about, like, we BS around here. One of the things was that he and Babe got lost in Minnesota, and all of their tracks are basically the lakes. And there's a few lakes that actually kind of have that shoehorn, or that, like, of course, I was a kid, so I was confusing a horseshoe versus a bowl. But I was looking at it, I was like, I could see that. But I grew up and I learned about glaciers, and it was so much better.
But the funny thing is I grew up in Ohio, which, got squashed by glaciers as well. And Ohio has no natural lakes.
Oh, that's because it's not as awesome as Minnesota. It knew, that glacier knew where to put the lakes. Honestly, I have no clue, because I know Minnesota was underwater at one point. I wonder if that had anything to do with it, too.
It could be.
We may never know. But yeah, back to the chemicals, and I only eat natural food. Yeah, there's also something, like, some people will say, well, organic food is better for you, or you'll have, or has less calories.
Yeah, I've seen claims that organic food has higher nutritional value.
How many times has that been debunked?
I don't know. And there was a study just released that says that organic foods require more land than non-organic foods.
Which makes sense. I mean, I am not a farmer. My parents were not farmers. My grandfather, on the other hand, was a dairy farmer. And, like, the little information that I've gleaned off of that is that, because with the non-organic food and non-organic animals, once, like, for example, an animal, once a cow has an antibiotic or gets sick and they take them to the doctor, that cow is now useless for organic food. Mm-hmm. Because it's no longer, and to be organic, you have to do things for like a certain amount of time before it's considered organic. Like, the rules are crazy.
Yeah. I think it's 7 years.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then what's also interesting is there's radiation farming.
Oh.
And you can do radiation farming and still technically be organic. So I always look and I go, okay, so you're doing this thing that is very definitely not organic. And we're still organic here. This makes no sense.
Yeah, because after World War II, the U.S. government started the Atoms for Peace program, which was a desperate attempt to show that there was a benefit to nuclear technology other than weapons. And they did it's called atomic gardening. And what they would do was they would have all these plants exposed to radioactive materials and hoping to induce mutations. This was, before we had any kind of genetic engineering technology. And not much came out of it that was actually useful. The only plant that came out of it that was useful that I can think of, although I believe there have been others, are the ruby red grapefruit.
Yup. Delicious grapefruit. At least we got grapefruit, though. I mean, that's something. All right. Well, we do need to go for one last commercial break. We'll return with our guest, Tucker Drake of the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. Please stay with us. I'm Hertzie Hertz, and you're listening to Atheist Talk on KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Welcome back to AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. You're tuned into Atheist Talk, and I'm your host, Hertzie Hertz. Today, we're talking with Tucker Drake of the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast, and this is our final segment with Tucker. Sorry, I need to update these notes. If you're curious about Minnesota Atheists, you can check out the Minnesota Atheist websites. We have previous episodes, articles, and book reviews, and peruse the calendar of upcoming events. You can also sign up for the Atheist Weekly email, which can give you links to those upcoming events. We have a ton of activities going around the Twin Cities and outlying suburbs. For example, we have Godless Gamers on Thursday nights. We're looking at doing a white elephant gift exchange on January 12th, though that one looks like it's filling up fast. So if you're interested, click quick. And of course, next week we'll have our monthly Atheist Talk community brunch at Cucumbers, which I am hopefully going to go to. I won't make any promises on the air. All right. Let's see. And if you enjoyed the show and all that Minnesota Atheist has to offer, consider becoming a member of Minnesota Atheist while you're on the website. Membership has some great perks. Check out the hows and the whys on the website. And now back to our conversation with Tucker Drake from the Atheist and the Trailer Park podcast.
Somebody needs coffee.
I know. And you know what's funny is like a week or so ago, Robert Stanley was on and he was saying, wow, you do so well for doing it live and not taking any takes. I'm like, no. I keep wanting to say the Atheist and the podcast. I don't know why. So Tucker, we were talking about fictions that we love, that we hold on to. So, what's another favorite of yours?
Well, the swimming after eating one.
Yes. Because I've gone to the pool and then I've eaten at the pool and then gone swimming. I mean, that's
right. And that's when I've heard ever since I was a little kid. Oh, you got to wait 30 minutes before you go swimming after eating.
Yes. And do you mind getting into some that are not necessarily more science-y, just more like just a little weird?
Sure.
All right. How about you've heard of Schrodinger's cat, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Yes. And how Schrodinger's cat, so for those who don't know, Schrodinger's cat is a quantum physics idea. It's not even really an experiment, but it's about you putting a cat in a box with some poison and some radioactive material, and you close the box. And at a certain point with quantum physics, the cat is both dead and alive until you open the box. And of course, there's all sorts of like meme stuff about the cat and such, but it's really not about a cat. It's about the fluctuating reality of what's in the box. What's in the box?
Gwyneth Paltrow's head.
Do they ever actually? I haven't seen that movie. Do they actually show that?
I think so. It's been so long since I've seen it.
Oh my gosh.
I think so too, but then thinking about it made me second guess myself, and now I'm not 100% sure anymore.
Oh my gosh, it's Schrodinger's box all over again. Schrodinger's movie, they both show and don't show what's in the box. Like Pulp Fiction, they never show you what's in that briefcase.
That's why he asks so many times.
What's in the box? Here's one so that we can at least get our atheist cred on the show for a moment. Jesus was a white European man.
Yeah. And supposedly that has to do with one of the Borgias insisting that they paint Jesus as him. And, because of their power and influence in Italy at the time, all the images of Christ soon became modeled after this guy.
Was it him? Because I heard it was his father, Pope Alexander, I think.
It could be. This is one of those things that I've never really bothered to research, but I've seen enough claims to it so that I give it some credibility.
Yeah. Because it's like I know one of the more famous supposed paintings of Jesus is supposed to be based off of, I think it's Caesar Borgia.
Yeah, sounds right.
That family is fascinating.
Yeah.
Though I do have to say, like with many with many historical things, you have to take a lot of that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you've heard of the Bloody Countess?
Lucretia?
I think that was her. No, Elizabeth Bathory.
Oh, the one who supposedly bathed in the blood of virgins.
Exactly. If you look into her story, there's a lot of politics that go into it too.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, it always makes me wonder how much of this was actually true and how much of this was kind of made up.
Yeah. But there's something to remember with all that is there was a guy, his name was Witold Pilecki. He was a member of the Polish resistance movement, and he volunteered to be a prisoner in Auschwitz. And he was able to smuggle out reports to the Polish government in exile in the UK. And he described to them exactly what all was going on inside Auschwitz and how horrible it was. And nobody in the government in exile or the Allies governments believed him because those accounts were just too horrific. And it was only after they started liberating the camps that they realized, oh, he was telling us the truth the whole time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that is definitely true because I am a true crime fan. There is nothing more terrifying than reality. Like the NCIS and the CSI episodes and stuff, almost nothing they do compares to what people have actually done. Especially when you're reading it and you're like, no, somebody actually did this. This is a true thing.
Yeah.
So we have about a minute and a half left. And so for our Patreons, if you're lucky enough to be a Patreon, Tucker and I are actually going to go into some myths involving the human body and reproduction. So I don't want to say too much on the air because I don't want the FCC to come down on us. But if you're a Patreon, you're going to get lucky with those. And we'll probably go off topic and talk about Tucker's cat because, it's a cat. And, I have to talk about cats at least once. And we'll probably talk about Gamcast.
And he has a name that's probably not safe for radio.
Oh, so if you're a Patreon, you're going to get super lucky and you are going to hear his cat's name. Dun, dun, dun. But we've got one more myth I want to hit real quick. Everything but water makes you dehydrated. So many times I've heard even doctors say this. But that's juice is just going to make you dehydrated. I'm like, but isn't juice mostly made out of water?
Yeah. And caffeine will do it, but the amounts are lethal that you have to consume.
Well, apparently we need to drink more coffee. All right, that's it. Thank you for tuning into Atheist Talk. We'd love for you to join us next Sunday, which should be another exciting episode. Have a great weekend.